So you found the skeleton. How would you tell if it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey there YouTube, the Dapper Dinosaur here, back again to help out Cindi Lincoln as she asked for on Facebook. Let's talk about why some dragons aren't dinosaurs. But first, I want to remind everyone that nothing about evolution says that non-avian dinosaurs can't have survived. The reason we know they haven't is because they simply aren't around, and there is no reliable historical reports of them, and there are no post-KPG fossils of them.
This one is really cool. Okay, this is a mural from the 1600s. It's located in Greece in a monastery. If you look real close, you'll see there's a monastery built on top of those rocks. This mural shows Adam naming the animals. Do you see two strange animals that we thought were extinct?
I see arrows pointing to a dragon that doesn't resemble any dinosaur or pterosaur known, and a camel.
Flying fiery serpent with a crooked tail.
But that doesn't describe any extinct animal, and this depiction also doesn't look like any extinct animal. And this fresco is from the 17th century. So is the claim that there were dragons that looked like that, flying around Greece at the beginning of the 17th century? Because that's pretty recent. I think we'd have a lot more evidence than just some cartoonish dragon pictures.
Bronisaur? Made the same day as Adam.
Okay, I get that the color is weird for a camel, but here's a clearer picture. This creature has a mammal-like face with ears that's recognizably shaped like a camel, and it has the hump of a dromedary camel, and even the characteristic down then up U-shaped curve to the neck. This is just a blue camel. Now that's an odd choice for color in a picture of a camel, but then Eastern Orthodox icons aren't known for picking realistic color. Human skin often has a greenish hue, the sky is usually gold, and indoor scenes are usually depicted outdoor, but there's a red cloth hanging up somewhere to tip you off it was indoors. Further, they often do things like reverse perspective, etc. Eastern Orthodox iconography is weird, but that's still much more likely a camel than a sauropod.
These two are about a creature that has been seen in the boundary water canoe area of Canada and Northern America, okay? All these Indian tribes have legends of a water lynx, an underwater panther. Here's another piece of artwork showing it. He's got horns like a bull.
Horns like a bull, spikes down its back, the body of a panther, and lives underwater. That doesn't describe even vaguely any dinosaur. We can't simply point to chimerical creatures and decide that 1, they are real, and 2, they are dinosaurs. To conclude that a picture depicts what we would think of as an extinct dinosaur, you need to confirm that it's an authentically ancient image. These are, as far as I can tell. You'd have to show it's not a composite of images, which these seem not to be, but last you'd have to show that it depicts an identifiable dinosaur, at least down to maybe the family level. This doesn't resemble anything that could be in any group of dinosaurs.
So the Indians say it has a head and paws of a giant cat, but it's covered in scales, and its spikes are like daggers running along its back and tail. Interesting. Kind of like a dinosaur.
No, there is no dinosaur that fits that description. I think the problem might be that Cindi has not really learned what the word dinosaur means. This is no surprise, as she spent years under the thumb of the guy who, let's remember, couldn't tell me what a dinosaur is when I asked him.
So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell if it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
But dinosaur is not simply a word that means big, scary, scaly thing from the past. It's a scientific group of animals with very specific anatomical traits and well-known divisions and subdivisions. Just like you can't say a Goliath spider is a mammal because both Goliath spiders and mammals are fuzzy, you can't say that anything described as being big and scaly is a dinosaur. And you especially can't do that with chimerical creatures. There are no chimerical creatures known today or in the fossil record. No griffins, no pegasi, no Babylonian dragons, no sphinxes, none of that. So if you want to propose that one existed, first, it wouldn't be a dinosaur. It would instead be basically proof positive of special creation. But second, you'd also need more than human depictions. You'd need actual remains. We don't have any remains of water panthers.
Here's a hadrosaur in a human artwork.
Well, here's a clearer picture of that animal. I don't know what it is, but I know it's not a hadrosaur, at least not one drawn from life. And I know that for the simple fact that it has external ears, so it's a mammal, and from the fact that it has claws on its front feet. We know hadrosaurs didn't have claws on their front feet in any digit but the thumb, and not even always then.
Now, our critics, the evolutionists and atheists, they say, well, you know what? We also find artwork of mermaids. That doesn't mean mermaids are real. That's true. However, there are no fossil mermaids. These creatures match known fossils.
But they don't. If they did, creationists could say which fossils, and then show how they match them. But instead we get kind of vague identifications of these alleged dinosaurs. And when someone who actually knows about these dinosaurs comes in, they see immediately that they look almost nothing like the actual creatures. Instead, they either look like mythical chimeras, or they look like pop culture depictions of dinosaurs, not the actual animals.
Reality-based. This is a really cool mosaic. In Roman times, it shows two long-necked dragons necking, 200 years after Christ.
But they have the head of Goofy from Disney cartoons. And a second head coming out of their back. That doesn't match any dinosaur, or even any animal. Animals don't have heads coming out of the middle of their backs.
This is a really cool statue found in Mexico. It's really small, but you see that tail is so long, it's longer than that body.
Quadruped dinosaur tails were never that long, and they don't drag on the ground. But lizard tails can be extremely long, and do often drag on the ground. But this is probably just a chimerical animal, because it doesn't strongly resemble a lizard, a mammal, or a dinosaur.
This is Peruvian fabric. There's the teeth. There's the body and the legs and the tail.
I mean, this Atari level of graphics makes it hard to identify that as anything in particular. I could just as easily say it's a South American camelid like a guanaco or alpaca or a llama.
Let's look at one of the more common dinosaur legends. Quote, legends. I think it's true. So, St. George and the Dragon. There are legends everywhere of heroes slaying dragons to save the village.
Right, but you have to remember that only in recent times did the word stop basically meaning dangerous reptile and come to be a more specific type of not real animal. These legends are probably based on people killing big, dangerous, scaly things like large monitor lizards, large venomous snakes, or crocodiles.
Now, the Bible uses the word dragon instead of dinosaur. Dinosaur wasn't invented until the 1800s. So in the Bible, you'll find the word dragon, flying fiery serpent, leviathan, behemoth, and cockatrice. Okay?
Well, you're not going to find cockatrice outside of the King James Version, but yes, if the Bible did talk about non-avian dinosaurs, I agree with Cindi, we shouldn't expect a translation written before the word dinosaur was invented to use that word. So the real question becomes, do any of the animals she listed off actually seem more likely to be dinosaurs, entirely mythical, or known non-dinosaurian animals? I don't know if she's going to get into the specifics, but if she does, I'll address these individually then.
So, if I had a child here, I would have him put on his knight in shining armor costume and get ready to battle the dragons.
That's pretty cute, not gonna lie.
This is the best shot here because it actually not only shows the knight and the dragon, but it shows bones of humans and sheep, showing that this dragon was a menace and had to be destroyed in order to save the village. Here's the damsel in distress and her sheep.
Okay, but this carving was made in 1450, according to your poster. That's more than 11 centuries after the story happened. Why do we think that 11 and a half centuries after the fact, when there are no cameras, that the depiction of the dragon in art would look anything like the creature St. George killed, assuming the story is even true? Further, we know that the story is set in the southern Mediterranean and not in Western Europe, but everything here is in the trappings of 15th century Europe. So we know that this is not an accurate depiction in the details besides the dragon, so why should we take the depiction of the dragon as basically the only accurate part of this picture?
This is an altar cloth in Spain, dated around the 1400s.
This is a minor point, and I don't think the mistake is Cindy's, but I want to point out that this is not an altar cloth. Altar cloths only depict a very few scenes in any church, and Catholic ones tend not to have pictures on them at all. What this is the front piece of an altar carved by Antonio Saddurini in the Chapel of St. George in the Palace of the Generalitat in Barcelona. So if you were in the chapel standing in the nave facing the altar, you would see this relief carving facing you.
Same story over here in Sweden. The hero, the dragon, and the human bones.
But this dragon looks very little like the first one we saw, so I'm not sure what we're supposed to take away from this other than artists have wildly different takes on the same legend. After this is just a lot more pictures of St. George in which the dragon has very little consistency and all of which were made centuries to over a millennium after the alleged events. So I feel like I've covered that.
Both Alexander the Great and Marco Polo had journal entries talking about dragons that scared their people.
Now we're just back to eyewitnesses aren't terribly good evidence, especially after the fact, and especially now that we use the word dragon in a way they didn't. So if they saw a big Asian water monitor come out of a cave, they'd probably call it a dragon, and with good reason. They can bite off fingers, cut through muscle and tendon like butter. They could kill a man easily, especially at a time when there was no reliable medicine, no antibiotics, and people barely understood how to staunch bleeding. Similarly, they may well have described various crocodilians of India as dragons. Before we leap to the conclusion that they saw dinosaurs in India, we first have to establish their stories are true, then we have to establish why the animals they describe couldn't be any of the known fauna of the area, and then we have to establish that the animals they describe actually resemble real dinosaurs. We haven't done any of those things. After this, it's much more depictions of dragons that don't look like any dinosaur, especially in that dinosaur tails aren't crooked, they don't have bat wings, and dinosaurs only ever had 4 limbs, not the 6 often seen in these pictures.
Today, in Papua New Guinea, there's talk of some kind of pterodactyl that has bioluminescence, glows in the dark.
This is the ropin, a cryptid from Papua New Guinea. Trey the Explainer has done a far more thorough video on this than I ever could, so simply check the link above for that video. Then come back or finish this video and check his out afterwards.
Have you ever heard of the Bombardier Beetle?
No.
No? Supposedly they live in Alabama. I really would like one. If you catch one, bring it here. So the Bombardier Beetle actually can shoot fire at its tailpipe.
Well, scalding liquid, not actual fire. Nothing gets set on fire after being sprayed by a Bombardier Beetle, but they can get burned.
So if you've ever made a volcano in school, you take vinegar and baking soda. Two separate ingredients, they're inert. Put them together, they explode, and you make a volcano. Same with the Bombardier Beetle. He's got twin chambers in his rear. One has hydrogen peroxide and one has hydroquinone, if I'm not mistaken. They're inert by themselves, but when they go out the same tailpipe.
While I understand that this is a simplified explanation, it is vital to note that these chemicals together do not react violently, because the activation energy for the reaction is too high for it to occur at the rate needed at normal temperatures and pressure. The beetle actually uses 2 enzymes to break down both chemicals first. Now on its own, hydroquinone is mildly toxic and irritating to skin. Insects secrete it in order to harden their exoskeletons, so it's already lying around insects anyway. And it is used in some insects, such as stink bugs, and other members of the Bombardier beetle's family, Carabidae, to make them unpalatable to predators. In other carabid beetles, the hydroquinone collects into not quite internal pockets on the exoskeleton, near the anus, so we actually have living transitional forms for the Bombardier beetle. Hydrogen peroxide can also be synthesized by life forms and is both toxic and irritating to sensitive parts such as the eyes and mouth of predators. So it only needs to be secreted onto the back of our developing Bombardier beetle for it to gain even more protection from predators. Now, if the storage area for these chemicals becomes internalized, the reservoirs of them will be easier to maintain, since they will both evaporate less, and muscle action could be used to propel chemicals out of the organism, which will allow them to project the rather stinky and irritating soup at predators. Now at this point, we're not spewing some dangerous scalding liquid, but that's really only a couple steps away. Introducing some peroxidase into the mix will split some of the peroxide into H2O and O2, upping the pressure and temperature of this mix, which will allow it to be propelled from the insect more forcefully. Finally, add some catalase to break down the hydroquinone, and the free diatomic oxygen can start heating things up. Now you have some explosive mix. At this point, you're basically at the Bombardier beetle. At no point in this process does the Bombardier beetle have any risk of blowing itself up. When Kent told Miss Lincoln about how the Bombardier beetle would blow itself up trying to evolve, he was either ignorant or lying.
That creature defies evolution, by the way. He had to be perfect from the beginning, or he'd blow himself up, would he not?
Not with the mechanism of a Bombardier beetle. Let's look at some footage of a Bombardier beetle. Notice how the excretion of the beetle is not fire, but a liquid spray. If you want a flamethrower to come out of an animal's mouth, you're going to need to find a new mechanism. Plus, unlike insects, vertebrates don't really just naturally make a bunch of hydroquinone, so where would they be getting it?
Okay, but here's an Icca Stone replica of a fire-breathing dragon. Maybe it's not a fairy tale after all. If he had twin chambers in his head, he could blow fire as well. In the book of Job, God talks about a fire-breathing, ocean-dwelling creature.
Yes, that's Leviathan, the Hebrew equivalent of Tiamat, the chaos serpent that according to the Psalms, God slew as part of the creation of the world. Just like how the Mesopotamian gods slew Tiamat to bring order to the cosmos from her primordial waters of chaos. This is part of a common motif in many world religions called the Chaos Kampf, in which God, or the gods, bring order to chaos by slaying some great monster. Now, it's not clear how literally many of these religions took this. It's possible they may have thought of the chaos monster as more of a metaphor or as a personification of the force of chaos and decay, or maybe they thought of it as a literal monster. But even if it's a literal monster according to the Bible, it's certainly not a dinosaur, because dinosaurs don't live in the ocean, except for like penguins, I guess. The hard-shelled eggs of dinosaurs make them rather unsuited to life as fully aquatic organisms, because they can't hatch their eggs internally like lizards can, and their eggs can't be abandoned like those of turtles, because their young need far too much care for far too long. The only exceptions seem to be the sauropods, who may have abandoned their eggs, but these creatures couldn't spend much time submerged, and were very far from being aquatic. Instead, they were already highly specialized land herbivores.
Let's see what else to show you. Let's go over here to the Icca Stones. I want to explain a little bit about those. We were talking about Dennis Swift visiting us. Well, there's our opponents say that the Icca Stones are fraud.
Yes, because the man who made them said so, and even demonstrated how he made them. You can produce your own Icca Stones. All you need is a stone, a chisel, a hammer, a modicum of artistic talent, and some cow dung. Simply carve your picture into the rock with your hammer and chisel. Feel free to draw on the rock first, as long as you wash it thoroughly. Then cake the rock in cow dung. Next, simply sit on a fire for a few hours. Wash it off, and boom! Instant Icca Stone that even looks old. Further, the Icca Stones lack one important thing that you need to authenticate an archaeological find. They lack provenance. Provenance is sort of like the chain of custody of evidence in a criminal case. In order for a find to be of archaeological significance, the exact location where it was found needs to be documented. This is also true in paleontology. Unfortunately, the Icca Stones were supposedly found in a cave at an undisclosed location in Peru. That means that even if they were authentic, we couldn't know until the location of the cave is revealed, and hopefully, along with it, some remaining Icca Stones.
That they are not ancient, that modern man has etched these. Well, let's look into that a little bit. There's a book on this by Dennis Swift, if you'd like to get it. It's a quick read, and I really enjoyed it, okay? But the Icca Stones were actually discovered by the Spaniards in the 1500s.
There were some authentic stones discovered in the 20th century, but they don't depict dinosaurs, aliens, or brain surgery like the famous ones. Those only start appearing after such things enter pop culture in Peru.
I don't think that's a fraud. Over 50,000 of them have been found. They are individual burial stones, so every time they find a new grave, they find a new stone.
I don't know how many total carved stones have been found. I'm not sure it's important. The ones that are unusual and come from this mysterious cave seem to be fewer in number, but even if they're not, I'm not sure why there just being a bunch of them is a problem. The man who said he made them had been doing it for decades, and while the process took a while, that's mostly the baking. He can carve them quickly and then bake a whole bunch of them in dung at the same time, meaning he could realistically make nearly 100 a week if he wanted. And since they sell well, why wouldn't he?
Maybe in scenes from that person's life. Don't know. Now, there have been cases where modern day people have tried to etch these so they can sell them for money. They're worth money. Dr. Hovind had several in his Pensacola museum, and I think he paid a couple $1,000s for each. So yes, people would fraudulently make them. However, does that mean these are not real?
Not on its own, but given the lack of provenance and the fact that they portray not realistic dinosaurs, but dinosaurs as seen in comic books and toys of the early to mid-20th century, all this adds up to not likely being real. Also, some of the stones depict aliens, so if these are evidence of dinosaurs, they're also evidence of aliens, which I don't think is something Cindi is prepared to believe.
That means there's a sum of both. And you have to discern if it's real or fake.
The real ones are the ones with documented provenance. The fake ones are the ones that don't, and depict unrealistic things that have no other evidence of existing in the area. If it doesn't have an unlikely subject matter or provenance, then I'm happy putting it into the category of things we probably can't know. But what dinosaur is this?
When we were talking about the crooked tail, the repeated theme of the crooked tail, there's a Bible verse about that. Isaiah 27 says, "In that day the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent. He shall slay the dragon that is in the sea." More on that in the book of Job, like I mentioned before.
Dinosaurs don't live in the sea or have crooked tails. Further, the various aquatic reptiles also don't have crooked tails. Animals like ichthyosaurs, mosasaurs, pliosaurs, and turtles. None of them have crooked tails. The only place we see this crooked tail seems to be in art and literature, never in actual organisms.
Now, we have evidence on this wall of dinosaurs eating people. If dinosaurs ate people, wouldn't that mean they lived at the same time and not millions of years apart? Mm-hmm. So let's look at some witnesses of that. I have different continents with the same story. This is Wales. This is a cathedral in Wales. You'll see here's the eye of the dragon, here's the dermal frill, here's the mouth, and what is in his mouth?
Person.
Person. There's his two legs.
But it has the head and feet of a lion, not a dinosaur. So what makes this a dinosaur?
Okay, so Welsh is one witness. Witness number 2, this is an Aborigine artwork in Australia.
But here's the problem. That isn't an ancient Aboriginal painting. Those were done on rock. This clearly was not. Instead, it is a modern painting from the 1970s based on an illustration by Rudolf Zallinger. In fact, it shares the exact outline of Zallinger's line art. Further, plesiosaur necks can't do that. They were actually quite rigid. So this couldn't have been drawn from life. But don't take my word for it. That's according to Creation Ministries International.
And I mentioned Nessie has friends around the world. Tessie, Bessie. This is Yaru. Okay, in Australia they see the same plesiosaur-like creature and they call it Yaru.
But I can't find anything about Yaru that doesn't stem back to this painting and stories about it. It doesn't even appear on cryptozoology sites. Basically, there is no reason independent of this demonstrably modern painting to think that Aborigines saw any kind of plesiosaur-like animal living in the lakes of Australia.
And this piece of artwork shows, again, that Yaru isn't friendly. What's in the tummy?
Another person.
Another person. So all these friends are trying to save their friend. Okay, so 2 witnesses now on 2 continents that dinosaurs ate man.
Well, one jar depicting a lion-headed and footed creature, and one modern painting based on 1970s paleontology. I would put that at 0 witnesses.
Okay, 3rd witness. This is a Viking woodcut of a dragon swallowing a man. This is around the 11th century, so Vikings would be Scandinavia. 3rd continent.
But that's a dog-headed giant snake, not a dinosaur. See, the cool thing about the Yaru painting is that it's so identifiable as a plesiosaur, even if it may be in an anatomically impossible position. And that's why Cindi called it a plesiosaur. See, if this looked like any particular kind of dinosaur, we'd be able to name it. Instead, it's a chimera, and it looks like no animal, but has characteristics of 2 unrelated animals, carnivorans and snakes. So I'm sticking with 0 witnesses so far. After this, we see more Icca Stones. I think I've covered that sufficiently. The dinosaurs shown on the stones don't look like actual dinosaurs, but like 1950s pop culture depictions of dinosaurs. And of course, as stated, we have good reason to think they're fakes, because the guy who faked them, Javier Cabrera Darquea, admitted it.
So again, we have the contrasting worldview. We want you to not think that in the beginning dinosaurs were all that was there.
While dinosaurs didn't show up at the beginning in mainstream science's view, they were relatively latecomers in the 3 billion or so year history of life. Also, this poster is from the Walking with Dinosaurs movie, and in the American version, they decided to, for some reason, dub lines for the dinosaurs, and it is the worst thing in the history of dinosaur movies. Seriously, I'd rather watch Velocipaster than that. If you want to watch this movie, try to find the UK version, which has no voice acting, just animals doing things.
Or that they rule the earth.
Well, the idea of ruling the earth is that they were the dominant megafauna for a while. It's not like there was a dinosaur empire, or was there? Alright, but that's where we're going to leave it for now. After this, we're going to get into irreducible complexity, but that's an entirely different topic, and so I want to take it in a different episode. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please do remember to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. Do turn on the notification bell so you're always notified when there's new Dapper Dino content. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. I just want to take a second to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 and above.
Bob Knob, Bent Hovend, Ian Chen, Chris Love, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, and Res Instance.
My channel members and patrons help make this channel possible, and without their support, this channel really wouldn't exist. If you would like to help support the channel as a member or patron, there are links in the description to both join the channel as well as join the Patreon. Patrons and members get mentioned in these credit scenes, as well as getting early access to my scripted videos, and if you pledge $10 or above, you can also get access to various 3D assets that I create for Blender, both for use in the channel, as well as just general giveaways to my supporters to help in any Blender projects they might have. If a monthly or annual pledge isn't for you, then there is also a merch store linked to the description. And if none of that's right for you, please just like and subscribe because every like and subscription really helps the video out. Thank you.